Elite Facts presents
8 creepy urban legends from the British Isles. 8. Wilgie, dog of darkness, Wales. So if you weren't scared of dogs before, this may change your perception of them. Think of this creature as the fairy dog's demonic, creepy, and downright terrifying brother. Now, it's common knowledge that the whole of Britain have legends of black dogs that portend certain doom. However, these legends have nothing on Wales's local legend. Hell, it even has a cooler sounding name:
the Dog of Darkness.
As with all scary, black, ethereal dogs, they are said to haunt lonely country roads and scare the living daylights out of travelers. The dog's appearance is said to be a dark omen, but isn't that obvious? Why would you assume a demonic hound with night black fur was anything but bad?
7.
Nuclavie, Scotland. With Wales out of the way, let's take a look at what Scotland has to offer. And oh boy, do they have quite the legend to tell you. The Nuclavie is considered to be the worst of all Scottish monsters by some, as this creature is a sort of twisted Scottish version of the centaur. His sole purpose was simply to hurt and possibly kill those living on the Orkney Islands, and he was made of the top half of a man sewn onto the back of some sort of rotting horse. Sounds twisted, right? He was said to be the cause of blight, disaster, floods, and more because of his purely evil nature. Although we have discussed horrible monsters on Listverse before, we think we can safely say this one takes the cake.
6.
The Whitechapel Ghost Train. During the early days of the good old London Underground, death was not an uncommon occurrence in London's many hospitals. One of the many problems hospitals had were overflowing morgues and nowhere to put the steadily mounting bodies. The Royal London Hospital came up with a solution equal parts genius and grotesque. Without informing anybody of their intentions, they allegedly installed a new line in the underground running underneath the hospital and into Whitechapel. The idea behind this was that they would have a line they could use to ferry human cadavers away from the morgue, to lie unremarked upon in the station's spare ticket office, just meters away from oblivious commuters. As entertaining and fascinating as this story is, it's almost certainly untrue. But hey, it makes for a very intriguing urban legend, one that communicates our fear of death and the unknown as effectively as any number of ghost stories.
5.
The Crying Girl, King's Cross Station. Before we go any further, it's probably best to mention that the United Kingdom as a whole has a lot of ghost stories and urban legends centered around railway stations, much like the previously mentioned Whitechapel Ghost Train. And this myth we're going to talk about now. At roughly 7:30 p.m. on November 18, 1987, someone carelessly dropped a lit match on a King's Cross Station escalator. What followed was a massive fire that completely engulfed the entire ticket office, resulting in the deaths of 31 people, as well as trapping hundreds of people underground. Today, the terrible memories of the fire still linger on in the form of the Crying Girl, a young woman with long brown hair dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. The Crying Girl has been spotted around the station, seemingly inconsolable with grief. It's been reported by passengers themselves that they tried to comfort her only to see her suddenly disappear in the crowd or feel their arms going right through her. Even more creepy, people have heard her sobs when the platforms are empty, and others have smelled smoke curling out from underneath the escalators. This is just freaky. Even though no one has ever gotten a close and clear look at the young girl, it's thought she's one of the fire's victims, her spirit left behind to wait forever on the platform where she died. That being said, crying children often turn up in urban legend, many of which are cautionary tales and may go some way to explaining the King's Cross haunting. 4. The Tulip Staircase Ghost, Greenwich. Way back in 1966, the Reverend R.W. Hardy was on a visit to the Queen's House in Greenwich. While on his visit, he decided to take a picture of the staircase due to how extravagant it was. As he was taking the photo, he almost immediately paused as he felt a strange presence. At the time, he thought no more about it and took the photo. In fact, he didn't think much about that moment at all. That is until he got his photo back from developing. It transpired that the Reverend had accidentally taken one of the most infamous pictures in supernatural history, featuring a mournful hooded figure clinging to the railings of the staircase. It appeared to be impossible, the sort of ghostly picture you couldn't fake. When news of the photograph went public, the British Ghost Club decided to investigate the building themselves. With recording equipment in tow, they headed to the Queen's House to perform a seance. Their records of the evening make for some uniquely disturbing reading. The report of this investigation is as follows. Starting at 10:54 p.m., the team began to make observations. These start off in a fairly boring fashion at first, noting bell rings and stones and whatnot, but as they go on, things start to get spooky. At 11:15 p.m., they record a slightly damp smell, followed by the distant ringing of a bell. Then suddenly, something happens. The handwriting becomes illegible, as if distorted by intense fear. Then it descends into mad scribbles before stopping altogether. Even to this day, no one really knows what the team saw that night. However, the legend of the Tulip Staircase ghost lingers on, just daring some amateur ghost hunter to try and solve it.
3,
The Pig-Faced Woman. To be fair, if you were to call anyone a pig-face, they'd probably want to murder you too. Pig-faced women are said to have the body of a normal woman but the head of a pig. I know, it doesn't sound terrifying at all. It just sounds like Miss Piggy from the Muppets. Anyway, these women were created by magic, as witches would approach newlywed husbands and give them a simple choice. Either their wife would look like a pig to them but beautiful to everyone else, or be beautiful to him and like a pig to everyone else. As you'd probably expect with a tale like this, men would more often than not choose the latter, and thus a pig-faced woman was created. Sometime between the 18th and 19th century, most people believed in the existence of pig-faced women. People went into full panic mode when rumors spread that there was a pig-faced woman living in London. However, over time, people began to come to their senses, and belief in pig-faced women slowly but surely started to die down. However, like with most other English monsters, very few people still believe in their existence.
2,
The Highgate Vampires. Highgate Cemetery is, without a doubt, the most perfect setting for a horror story, what with its creepy, abandoned tone and aesthetic. Such a good setting, in fact, that it does already have a creepy tale to its name, and that tale comes in the form of the Highgate Vampire. In 1969, a local man called David Ferrant reported seeing a ghostly gray figure walking through the cemetery. Well, as you'd probably guessed, he wasn't alone. Many reports have described this entity to be weirdly similar to Ferrant's. One man by the name of Sean Manchester decided it would be a good idea to further investigate these reports himself. That's when things got really strange. Manchester claimed the graveyard was the resting place of a vampire that had to be killed. Although when first hearing his claims, he might sound completely insane and delusional, but many people actually believed him, and the rumor began to spread rapidly. Not long after, Ferrant was arrested in the graveyard carrying a crucifix and a heavy wooden stake. Now in a state of panic, locals began to march on the cemetery looking for the vampire. During this period, Manchester states that a girl who was sleepwalking had led him into the graves one night to kill the monster. He and Ferrant became convinced a group of Satanists were using the cemetery to summon demons, one demon of which was the vampire. Although the rumors died down with Ferrant's conviction for desecrating memorials, the legend of the vampire still lives on. This leaves the questions as to whether or not this legend is real or fake. We may never know. Funny enough, however, this isn't the only graveyard in the United Kingdom to have ties to the creatures of the night.
1,
The White Death, Scotland. Let's wrap up this list with another terror from the Highlands of Scotland. This is a story about a little girl in Scotland who hated her life so much that she wanted to destroy every last trace of herself. She finally decided to commit suicide, and shortly afterwards her family found out what she'd done. In a horrible twist, every member of her family died only a few days later, their limbs torn apart. The legend says that when you learn about the White Death, the girl's ghost might come and find you and knock repeatedly on your door. Each knock gets louder till you open the door and she kills you for fear that you'll tell someone else of her existence. Her main goal is to prevent anyone from knowing about her. Like most urban legends, the story is probably nothing more than the wild imagination of a modern Aesop. But all the same, it's always good practice to find out who's standing on the other side of your door.
Don't forget to like us and subscribe for more Elite Facts.